In this section, we'll have a look at how we can enhance the use of text inside our applications. So the first thing is that we want to, where we do have text, to make sure we are structuring it, formatting it, presenting it in a fashion that supports scanning. And unless it's something like a novel, where the user is going to read through from start to end and read all of the words, that's probably the only case where we don't really need to be that concerned about formatting. In every other case, if we're displaying textual information on screen, or even if we're writing a report, we absolutely want to make sure that we have structured our text so the user can easily scan through it. Because in those cases, the most common use case is that the user is looking for certain pieces of information, or is looking to get a bit of an overarching feel as to what is contained inside it, and maybe focus on a few specific areas that are of interest. So we want to make sure that we better support. So you can see the images over here. If we have an example of where it just is the proverbial wall of text, unless it's a novel, that's not a good thing. In the other example where we are using headings and we separate things out and we're using bulleted points and other mechanisms, that's much better than by way of enabling and helping our users to better support and to scan. So in this section we'll look at a number of things that helps us get to that sort of more happy position. So the first one is to use headings, and that's the key thing. We should have headings at different levels. You may have section titles and subtitles and so on, but spread throughout our text. They really provide us with scan points. We can look at the headings, we look at the subheadings, and depending on those, it helps us understand then, okay, is this section relevant to me? Can I skip this bit over? Should I look at this one in more detail? So they help us scan through and to jump over sections which may not be relevant. And that's incredibly important. Ideally, our headings, they should be short, they should be easily understood, while still capturing what is inside that particular section. But we don't want to let our headings float, and you can see an example of this down in the bottom of the screen. So the example over on the left hand side, we have some text above, some text below, and sort of a heading then that is equidistant between them. So if we're looking at this visually, that heading seems to float. It doesn't seem to be closely or clearly attached with the text. The example over on the right hand side is one where we have the heading closer to the piece of text underneath than it is to the one above. So us looking at that visually, we'll see, oh, it's closer to it, so we will then link it to it. So we'll think, yes, that's a heading that refers to the text underneath. Keep paragraph sharp is another one. And this generally again applies over here. You can see an example of where we have a lot of text, and fair enough, if you're in a novel reading all of that, that's fine. That's generally not the case for reports or for information that we're displaying on screen. We want to use short paragraphs. It makes it easier for us to look at, to scan, and to track our way through it. We don't get lost then. It's more easier for us to track where we've got to. It's also more easier for us to then sort of look at a paragraph to think, is it relevant? Skip over to the next one if it's not. So these are all things that help us maintain our structure and to navigate more efficiently through text. Highlight key terms is really very important. Now inside a document we could use bold or other sort of aspects in terms of highlighting. A very, really good example of where it's done as well is inside IDEs for programming. And you see an example over here. Again, you'll all be familiar with this here depending on IDEs where you're using, where we have context sensitive highlighting, where the various keywords, the constants, the parameters all have different codings or colorings attached to them. And that helps us again understand what we're looking at and to segment and identify different elements. Using bulleted lists is really very important. So where we might have a paragraph of text, where inside that we have a long sort of list separated by commas, that's a good example of something then where we should be thinking, should we really not just display that as a list with bullet points? Again, it helps the user visually see, look, this is a list of several things that are related. Lets the user more easily look at each of the items and potentially compare them to one another. Omit needless words. So this comes from the element of style. Omit needless words. Vigorous writing is concise. A sentence should contain no unnecessary words. A paragraph, no unnecessary sentences. For the same reason that a drawing should have no unnecessary lines and a machine no unnecessary parts. And that's really very important. We want to make sure we use concise writing. And Krug, and don't make me think, has a bold challenge, but it's a really useful one. So anytime we write a piece of text, be it for a report, be it for something we want to display, it is good then to go through that and to cut out half of the words. Get rid of half of it. And you'd be surprised, quite often that's very easily done. You can work and you can get it down to half of the size. Krug then says, well, don't stop there. Take what you've got and get rid of half of that. Now that's more challenging, but if you do it, then you can be absolutely certain that what you are left with is the key, most important information. It's the bits that really matter, and you would probably have ended up writing in a way where you've got rid of unnecessary words, you've used small, simple words as well, and it's likely then to be much better in terms of something we can present to the user to help them to take it in more easily, to understand it, not to have to scroll and other things like that, which again are unnecessary work that we want to try to avoid. And on our final section in this then is some other aspects. So get rid of happy talk. Anything where you have something that is introductory or welcoming or tells you about, some fantastic feature. The reality is users are not really interested in that. Just get rid of it. Nobody's really going to care about it. So that can be safely excised. Get rid of instructions. That's slightly more controversial then, but it's really important that we do that. The reality is people don't read instructions. People will just jump in and use the application, and if they can't use it without help, then a lot of people are just likely to give up at that point. Some other people will then actually think, okay, I need a bit of help, let me try to find where that is. Now, if that's the case, then we do want to make sure that our instructions, they're minimal, they're clearly written, they're easily understood. But in the vast majority of cases, we shouldn't need to use instructions. The software should just simply work. We should have designed that to be the case, and it should be self-explanatory in any instances where there is a little bit of learning to be done with it. So that covers everything we want to look at when we're thinking about the use of words inside our interfaces. And it brings this section to an end in terms of our design advice. So we'll provide a summary now just to round things off.